Hello and welcome to another cup of coffee with me, Sandy. Life is strange because you can know people for many years, know about them, but don't know about their background. And my guest today is a friend. I've known him for many years. His name is Giles, and I know him as the Classic Car Club in Spain. But there is so much more to Ian that I didn't know about. So I've invited him to come and join me for a cup of coffee. And I'm just about to accept him. Ian, are you there? I'm admitting you now into my little office. I just saw a picture of you with a school cap on. Hello, Ian Giles. How are you?
Well, thank you. I'm not quite sure where you spotted that one, but
well, it came up and it was rather sweet. I'd rather have seen it for more. Where's the cap? You got it in your hand?
I think that was a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
I think that was taken from a menu from my 65th birthday party.
Oh, well, we won't go into numbers, but I'm sure that was last week.
It was
anyway,
long ago.
Welcome to a cup of coffee with me. We've known each other for a very long time.
We certainly have.
I think it must be nearly 30 years, and I've only known you about the Classic Car Club. But then when I've gone into a little bit of your background, I have found out so much more about you, which I want you to share with me and my audience today.
Goodness, I dread to think what you found.
Well, I shall only give out what I feel will be acceptable. But
only the stuff that's not classified.
That's right. So let's start at the beginning. You are very well known in the motor industry, motor rally, motor cars, anything to do with motoring and rallying. Yes. How did that start?
Well, it basically got off the ground when I was in my very early teens. My father was competing in local rallying, and I got the bug from there. And I was allowed to go out on 2 events, sat in the back of the car, which at that age was the most spectacular experience of my life. And from then on, all I ever wanted to do was get behind the wheel and drive rally cars or racing cars. The bug set in there.
Did you have to have a certain age for a license for a rally car?
Well, yes and no. You could start rallying as a co-driver at any age, and I started when I was 15. But to be a driver, you had to have, your normal Road Traffic Act's license, which you couldn't get until you were 17.
Yeah.
So as soon as I was 17, I passed my test in the first week, and then I just bought the cheapest car I could afford because I was a student. But I still went off doing the sort of disciplines that motorsport allowed you to do then, which was all at club level and was all fun. But the car I had then was already long obsolete, but it was a good thing to learn with. So I progressed slowly from there.
What was your first car? What was that car?
It was an Austin A35. I had it in 1969 when I was 17, and it was a 1958 vintage. So it was 11 years old then, which in today's cars wouldn't be that old. But then that was really old because everyone was rallying Minis, Ford Escorts, Porsches. So my little Austin A35 was very out of place.
Okay, so you had the bug and you started rallying. And what was your first rally? Where was it? What
that was the fun thing that is that my very first rally was when I was 17 as a driver, this is in 1969. My co-driver was my best friend who was 2 years older than me, but he'd had a big accident when we were racing push bikes and broken his neck. and was confined to a wheelchair. So what we did, we strapped the wheelchair into the boot of the car, locked him into the passenger seat of the car, and he had one little map light that was dangling from the roof because we put it in so badly. And we set off to go rallying. Well, in those days, road rallying was done at night. So you started very late at night and stayed rallying until perhaps 8 o'clock the following morning on a Sunday. Well, unfortunately, through the entire rally, we only saw one time control on the entire event out of about 40. And we only saw one other rally car, which was going the wrong way down a very difficult time section, and I bounced off the back of it in my attempts to go down the hill too fast, even though I was going the wrong way. So that was not an auspicious start to my rallying career.
No, but you improved.
Yeah, I did a bit.
Immensely, because you went on to win many rallies. Give me an idea of what you've won. Let's brag a little bit. Come on.
Well, I've won some championships. I won a lot of club events. I won some national events. I finished in the top 3 of big events like the Rothmans National. I've been in the team that won on the Welsh Rally. So I've done quite a lot of things, but I've also done a bit of racing, and I'm pleased to say I've attempted every discipline that there is in motorsport, from auto tests to auto crosses, to hill climbs, sprints, circuit races, rallies. I've done some teaching. So I've done most everything. One of the nicest events I've won was an event that was local to me, which was called the Wildlife Stages Rally, which I won 3 years running. And that was quite a pleasure to achieve that. That was a lot of fun.
Why was it called the Wildlife?
It was run through a wildlife park, the famous Crickets and Thomas Wildlife Park, where the TV series To the Manor Born was filmed. And it was big enough that they could close it to the public, obviously, and they could put in about a dozen special stages all within the park. So they had to close off all the wildlife, literally, and hence it was called the Wildlife Stages Rally. But to jump a decade or two, my last event was there as well. I'd won it 3 years running, and I was doing it as a sort of guest appearance, but I was sponsoring a lot of cars. I had a team of minis that were competing, and my pal that I told you about, Nick, was navigating for his brother in one of our cars, and they were very, very quick. And they seed these rallies from 1 to, say, 130, whatever it is. And I was seeded at number 1, and they were seeded at number 2. So you can imagine that their big thing was to beat me.
The rivalry was tremendous.
Yeah, it was. Unfortunately, there was an enormous accident, and my pal was killed. I didn't do a great deal. Well, I did go back to rallying a bit later, but the kind of serious stuff I stopped then. And that was 1980. I did continue rallying till about 1985, 86, but the serious stuff stopped then.
That must have affected you quite enormously.
It did, more than I realized at the time. I thought at the time I could just waltz through it and that I would be okay. I even had to come home, and my business ran from his parents' home, and I even had to come home and explain to his mother what had happened. And one thing that I learned, though, from her, which I've never forgotten, I said to her, because her kitchen was our office, it was the business that paid for the rallying, and it was the rallying that helped build the business. So we had a whole team of cars, and I ran everything from her kitchen. And on the Sunday night, when I got home to tell her what had happened, I said to her, well, obviously we'll close tomorrow for the week. And she said, oh, no, dear. She said, you open as normal. She said, life and business must go on. She said, so you be in as normal and open. And we did, which is, I suppose, where I get my kind of work ethic from and discipline from. That I don't believe you stop working unless you're dragged off in a box somewhere,
No, an amazing lady to have that kind of feeling inside, because obviously she was strong, but she, as you say,
Yeah.
her ethics were incredible, and they rubbed off on you. But you were also, over your years of in the motor rallying, and you were sponsored by very big companies.
Yes, that's right. I was contracted to British Leyland, as it was then, who manufactured the cars that I was competing in, and contracted to people like Dunlop, Esso. I mean, it was a incredibly expensive business to be in, and those sort of sponsorships, whilst they helped, they didn't pay for anything like the total cost of things. So I would have to fund that myself, and that was quite hard, really. So my businesses almost existed to keep the rallying going, whereas the rallying helped build the businesses by giving us the exposure and the publicity that we needed.
Yeah, which is
so it was an exciting time.
Yeah, yeah. Did you ever meet my very close friend, Sterling Moss?
Yes, I did. Actually, there's an amusing story about that, because Sterling Moss, although he did a great deal of rallying in his younger days, was a circuit man, and probably the best and most famous driver we've ever produced. But I was at Goodwood Festival of Speed for the year of his 80th birthday, and I was lucky enough to be invited in a hospitality suite by the Levant chicane with a load of banking people. And I was sat chatting with them, and they realized I was the only one there that was a proper motorsport person. And one of them asked me that question, said, do you know Sterling Moss? And I said, no, I don't. I said, I'd very much like to, but no, I don't know him. I've never met him. And with that, a guy called Barry Williams came walking by.
Yeah.
Barry Williams is one of the top racing drivers of his day. He was a close friend of Sterling Moss.
Yeah.
And he spotted me sat in this hospitality suite, and shouted at me to come out and say hello. So I said, excuse me, to all these banking chaps, and walked outside. And Barry was there, but Sterling Moss was with him. Well, Moss, being a polite old gentleman, obviously assumed that if I was a friend of Barry's, I must know him as well. And he proffered his hand to me, and he said, how are you, boy? Which was a normal greeting.
Yeah.
And I said, well, very well, Mr. Moss, thank you very much. And that was about it. And I exchanged my pleasantries with Barry and went back inside. And they were all sat there in a circle, looking aghast at me, or with mouths open, and said, I thought you said you didn't know Sterling Moss. Well, you don't like to brag, do you? So that was my kind of Moss story. So no, I never really met him properly and didn't know him, but I would love to have.
Well, if I can tell you my little story about Sterling Moss, whom I knew extremely well, because he was part of the Variety Club, which I was part of.
Oh, I understand, yes.
And we were at various functions together. And my number 5 spine surgery in London was at the Wellington Hospital. And many a time, Sterling Moss came to visit me on his motorbike, and the nurses and matron used to say, oh, your friend is here, the little one that's got the helmet and the motorbike. And I said, oh, you mean my friend Sterling Moss? And they said, yes. And he was just such a delight. What a wonderful, wonderful man. But then he had this awful accident in his own home, in the elevator that broke down.
He survived a massive accident in 1962 at Goodwood, which people didn't think he would survive. And then of course, he had the horrific accident you're talking about in falling down the lift shaft, I think, wasn't it?
Well, the actual lift just seemed to have dropped, and he was injured. And but he was like a cat with 9 lives, an amazing man with lots of stories and tremendous amount of humor, and very naughty eyes.
So I gather.
And just a fun guy. A fun guy.
But I only ever hear good stories about him.
Yes. And a man that is written in the books.
Oh, very much so.
Very much so, yeah.
Very much.
And then you decided it was time to give up being in England. And why did you come to Spain?
I couldn't stand the cold.
You and me both.
No, I think like many people, I wanted a change of scene. I got divorced. I'd had enough of business. I was stopping rallying. I came out to Spain, met a lady who I was later to marry. So I formed an attachment here straight away. But I can tell you one of the reasons that I moved out here was I came out on my very first trip in January 1986 with a pal of mine who was moving out here. And I came just for a week to kind of hold his hand and look around. And we were picked up from the airport by this gentleman, taken to his house. And he said to me, oh, what would you like to drink? And I said, oh, I'd have a gin and tonic, if I may, please. And he brought this enormous gin and tonic out for me. And I said to him, my goodness, I said, you pour a mean gin and tonic. And he said, my boy, if you knew how much we had to pay for tonic, you'd know why there's so much gin in it. And that's when I thought, I think I'm going to get to like it here. So I ended up buying the house next door to him, and I'm still there now.
Oh, my goodness me. So when you came here, you thought, what can you do? Is that?
Yes. In fact, there was a hiccup with that. I stayed for a couple of years, but I couldn't really settle. And I think, like a lot of people that come out here, especially as a single person on my own with no job to do, no work, but some money in my pocket, I spent most of my days taking lunch. And after a couple of years, I realized that this couldn't go on forever. And I went back to the UK for a couple of years. I'd by now met my now wife. And
Lovely Carol.
Yes, and then we came back to Spain for a couple of years. By now we had a property here, but then we decided that I needed to get back to business and make some money again. So we went back to England for 8 years, where I, although I was out of serious motorsport, I helped a little bit arranging classic car rallies that came out to Europe. So we had 8 years in England until 1993, I think it was, or 4 to 2001. And in that time, I was helping arrange these classic car rallies. And then we decided to come out here permanently, which is now, as we speak, 20 years ago.
That's amazing. So I met you before you were going backwards and forwards to.
That's right. I remember it well.
I remember it very well. Yes.
You remember it
well.
well.
Sancerre was a wonderful bottle.
I remember what a gorgeous lady you were, and still are, of course.
Oh, you were too kind. You were too kind. Let's get on to you. Are now the chairman, president of the most prestigious classic car club in Spain. And tell me more about it. Why did you start it here in Spain?
Well, when we decided to come back here, it was going to be about retirement and maybe just dabble with a few odd things, like maybe some sports cars or the odd classic cars, partly for fun, partly to help, assist our income. But that was not to be too successful. But because I had some cars down here, I started to think that why not form a club where we could use the experience that I've gained rallying and the organizational skills that I had and take people out, get them to use their classic cars, but get them to enjoy the countryside, the scenery, eat good food, drink good wine, because those are passions of mine. I suppose alongside motorsport, it's food and wine are my great passions. So I thought there must be a way to put all that lot together. Did this club of Andalusia, and that was, in fact, I did run another club for 2 years before that by invitation. But I decided that the best way to do it was to have something from scratch that was my own. And that's what gave me the, if you like, inspiration or maybe impetus to get this thing going. So my idea was that everybody who wanted to join had to have a classic car or something that I considered qualified as a classic.
What qualifies as a classic car? Because I don't know.
Well, that's a very interesting question. There's no fixed definition of what maketh a classic car. And they do say age alone doth not a classic make. Now, the reason I say that is that if you take some of our prestige manufacturers like Bentley, Rolls-Royce, Aston Martin, Jaguar, anything they produce, if one's got a checkbook big enough to go and buy one and drive it out, that to me is automatically a classic. Now, there are a lot who will disagree with me, but generally it's accepted that if a car is 25 years old, has an interesting lineage or a prestige or interesting history, then 25 years old or more qualifies it automatically as a classic. Well, I didn't want us to take ourselves that seriously. So what I've said is that, well, I will decide whether a car is eligible or not for the club. We'll work on that as a principle, but we'll also incorporate this business of if a car is of an outstanding interest or outstanding prestige, then I'll decide if it's acceptable or not. And that way, we don't take ourselves too seriously, but we have cars that allow us to, as we would say, do the miles. And we do the miles. So people get out and see the countryside.
Yeah, I know that you really do see the countryside. You find wonderful restaurants, places to stay. And that leads me into what is, besides the eating, drinking, and seeing, and also being a wonderful club, what else is the objective of the Classic Car Club?
It's making you exercise your classic car. So it's making you, I've never been one for static displays. They have their place, but it's not for me. We do very occasionally put on a concours d'elegance, but it doesn't interest me. To me, these cars are meant to be taken out and driven. I'm not one of these people who says, oh, it's raining, I shouldn't take the car out the garage. You know, to me, they come out of the garage, whatever the weather, because you should enjoy everything and go out and drive them. So what I wanted to do was get people to be led, if you like, by the nose to see Andalusia initially, to drive their cars and enjoy them. I put on a very gentle navigational challenge for them to help them get around the route so they all go the same way. And that way they can all drive entirely at their own pace. And that way then they're seeing the country, they're enjoying their cars, but they're having to do the miles. And then they're mixing with like-minded people and finishing up with a decent lunch or dinner and some decent wine in interesting places in Andalusia, or as we also do in all of the rest of Spain. So so it really, that is the objective, getting people together to have fun, enjoy driving their cars. Yeah,
that's magic. Do you and Carol go and do a recce before you do one of your trips?
Yeah, we do. And to give you an idea, we put on one day event every month without fail.
Right.
Yeah, and that means then, but that has to be prepared properly. It's got to be recce'd. It's got to be measured. The route has got to be drawn. We use a system that's called a tulip roadbook for navigation. It's incredibly accurate, incredibly simple to use, but because of that, it's a lot of work to put it together.
Yeah.
Now it's called that because it was developed by the organizers of the Tulip Rally in Holland in the 1950s. It's a navigation system that does without language. So it's all by signs and diagrams, but it's all measured very accurately. So we do that. So that means a trip out to recce it, often a trip out to plot it, and a trip to check it before doing the actual event.
That's a lot of work involved, huh?
It's a huge amount.
I
It also means,
didn't realize that.
oh yeah, and that's for everyone. It also means then meetings with hotels, restaurants,
Sure.
coffee shops.
Yeah.
We usually have a carver stop on the way round. And
I
the
should
thing
hope
is,
so.
yeah, oh, absolutely. But the club is now so successful that our problem is that we have too many people quite often.
Well, I was going to ask you, is there a restriction of membership?
Not yet. It's not unusual for us to take 100 people out on one of these runs, and finding venues that can cope with those numbers and then give us a good lunch is very difficult. So you need a start venue where they have coffee, bacon sandwiches, whatever. Then you need a finish venue, which has got to accommodate all of them and their cars. And that's a lot of cars, as you can imagine. So that's got to be put together. And then on top of that, we do at least 4 long distance tours every year, which are anything from 4 to 7 days. And each one of those is about 2 months work to do, and probably 3 months continual work. 3 weeks continual work, because a week out to check it all, a week to put it together, a week to recce it. And then a week to actually go out on the event with everyone. So it is a massive amount of work, but we do it because we love it. It's such fun.
Absolutely fun.
And that gets you to see Spain.
What are there specific cars that are allowed? Are there cars that you refuse? Have you refused cars?
Yeah, not really, only modern ones. Okay. Unfortunately, a lot of people hear all about the club and the events, and they might have an interest in old cars even, but they want to come along and have fun, but bring their what I call the modern silver box, the Range Rover or the Kia family hack, and I don't want those on the events. I push the envelope too far as it is, really, by accepting lots of cars that are not pure classics, but at least they might be interesting. But we won't take what I call silver boxes. So yeah, we do refuse those, and that gets a bit embarrassing sometimes. People think, well, it's a club, I can pay to join it. I pay my subscription. Why can't I join in? Yeah. And I have to say, look, I'm really sorry, but we don't want these cars on our events, and we won't take them.
I'm going to ask you, the picture that you've got behind you, tell me about that car.
Now, it's an interesting car. It's a Triumph TR8. Oh, yeah. It's one of only 19 that were built in right-hand drive form. And it's a car that I didn't mention this earlier, but I still, and have done for the last 20 years, compete in Spanish championship events. And I use that car, so you can see the numbers on the doors, all the lamps on the front of it. That's in the early hours somewhere up in the mountains near Jaén. And again, they seed these rallies like you would a tennis match. So you can see the numbers on the doors means we're reasonably good at it.
I'm going to go back a little bit, because you've done a lot of the same things that I've done. You've done a lot of television. You've done filming as well, precision driving for film, for commercials.
Commercials, yeah.
Yeah, and you've also done reporting, or
yes.
Tell me a little bit about that, because that's in my world.
Yeah, well, I can't lay any claims to wild success with that, but in the mid 1980s, I think it was, I was approached by BBC Radio Bristol and asked would I do a 10-minute slot on what was going on in the motoring world. And so, yeah, I was very happy to do it. So I did that, and they said, well, this was very good. Is there anything else that would interest you that you could offer to do? So I said, well, yeah, what about if I got hold of the current modern supercars, or, the fast cars of the day, and road test them, but do it, this is the early 80s, don't forget, but do it live in the car. So they thought that was a great idea. So I started by having a sound man come with us where we could get him in the back and recording my thoughts and information about the cars as a live road test. And there are not many people had done that, I think, then. So that then stretched to them giving me a half an hour to do what I wanted, basically on things motoring, which I did for quite a time, and then got to the stage where I was moving out here. So that came to an end then, but I really enjoyed doing that.
Yeah, that again was fun. By the sound of your life, everything that you have done has really had fun involved. Things that you were passionate about and that you loved. If you have to look back on your life, you don't have regrets.
No.
You made the most of it.
No, I've enjoyed all of it, and I would do it all again. I think, like a lot of people, if I had my time over, there's a lot I would have learned. And I wouldn't have given up the rallying when I actually did. When I gave up, I was just on the verge of that sort of transition to proper paid drives. And I stopped just at the wrong moment, and I should have kept going. That was the wrong thing to do. But, we all learn from our mistakes. Unfortunately, we don't get the chance to do these things again. No. So whilst I don't regret anything, there are things like that I would do slightly differently, I suppose.
If you look to the future, what are you planning to do once we are able to move around? Where is the next wonderful trip?
Eat, drink, and make merry. But do it.
Never include me. That upsets me tremendously.
We will try to. What I'm doing, I'm holding back from planning anything at the moment. We've done very, very well without breaking any rules. We managed to put on 10 or 11 one-day events last year and one 5-day event. In fact, our last 5-day event was in March last year. And we finished our event on the Friday night that we went into lockdown on the Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
And since then, we've managed to put an event on all bar one of the months, I think. And we put an event on in January. We weren't able to do this month, February. So depending on the rules and the restrictions that we may hear about later today, I would hope by March we might be able to put something on, at least a one-day event. Right. And then when things really lift, then we'll put on probably a 5-6 day event. I've no idea where we'll go, but a lot of us, I do an event that takes us into Portugal. We stop on the Algarve for a couple of days. So I think I might try and resurrect that.
But at the moment, Portugal is very, very closed.
But Portugal's bad at the moment. So yeah, it may well not be possible. And we won't do anything until we are wholly and legally allowed to do so.
Sure.
Because the one thing I do not want to do is tarnish this club's reputation by doing something that's totally irresponsible. We kind of push the envelope a bit with what we've done. But the last event we ran in January, we had 4 to a table. We stuck to social distancing. We didn't even have a driver's briefing before the event, which I normally do. I did all that by sheets of paper, dished out before the start. No coffee stop, no carver stop, and a lunch meeting where all the rules were observed. So we've tried to keep this proper. We don't want to try and be clever and circumvent the rules.
The age group of the people around about, is it a mixed age group?
I have to say that the average age is higher than you might expect. And the reason for that is that, especially down in this part of Spain, in the south of Spain, we have people from every nationality participate in our events. Uh-huh. But they're nearly all people that have retired.
Yes.
Obviously, some sooner and later than others, but they're nearly all people who have retired and have probably bought cars that they wanted in their youth that couldn't afford, and now they can. and they look for something to do with them. So the average age is higher than you would expect. I mean, I'm 67, 68.
Oh, you're still a youngster.
Well, I am a relative youngster in the car club, so, but everybody that comes out, they're young of heart and spirit, if not of body.
Yeah.
So they're a great crowd.
If there are people that want to make contact with you and find out more about the Classic Car Club, how do they do that?
The two ways, really. The first one is to just send me an email. And the email address is quite simple. It's info@cccandalusia.com. So info@ccc, as in Classic Car Club, cccandalusia.com.
And the Andalusia is with a C and not with an S.
Yes, well spotted, with a C, not an S, yeah. Or they can come through the club's website, which is all the W's, cccandalusia.com.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I know that one time you had a column in an English newspaper on the coast, and it was Life in the Fast Lane. And I'm going to say, quite honestly, your life has been in the fast lane. So, Ian Giles, this has really been nearly like this is your life. And I just want to say thank you for taking the time to share your life in rallying, your life in motorsports, your Classic Car Club, and all that you've shared with us today. And to my viewers, if by any chance you saw a notice across the screen that said the connection was not good, and a couple of times Ian did freeze, I don't know if it was his side or mine, but we carried on. There's no editing ever because this is such a relaxed program. And Ian, just thank you. And to my viewers, I say, if you enjoyed this as much as I did, you've got the website, you know how to find out more about the Classic Car Club, also more about Ian Giles. And just, Ian, take care. God bless. And to my viewers, I will see you again soon.
Sandy, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much for considering me for your program. I'm flattered.
I think that not having you would have been a sin. So take care, and just remember, I am around to go on one of the jollies. Don't forget.
I'm going to write that in my diary now, Sandy, and you will be invited as soon as we get going again.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody, and take care, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.